All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher wearing a suit here with Drew Dinsick. Today we'll go through the AMA questions that you've kindly sent us, tackling everything from Kentucky Derby, NBA playoffs, a lot of other good stuff. And then we'll close out with some chat about the Oklahoma City Thunder. But let's get into the first question, which is a two-parter on playoff modeling. Question from Rob W. What metric are you using most to separate value in the playoffs? And then a question from Paul. Drew, I think in the past you've mentioned handicapping the NBA playoffs is more art than science based on matchups, coaching adjustments, etc. Are you still relying on some player level modeling as a data point in series, or is it just watching the games and projecting forward?
Oh gosh, love these questions. Love talking process like this. And I'll start with Paul here, who's asking about player level inputs. And to start out a series, there's not really much art. I mean, you can kind of put a little bit of a qualitative layer on there if you think that a team has a coaching or matchup advantage, in my opinion. But for me, at the start of a series, like Denver Thunder on the horizon, like Denver Timberwolves on the horizon, like, yeah, numbers. Come up with as appropriate a guess as you can for minutes distribution for starters and support. And then as you build out a model for a series, you have to make some decisions about whether you're going to treat every game equally, which is absurd. You kind of will get into trouble that way pretty quickly, in my experience. Or if you try to kind of have an arc to your series where the style of usage changes from game 1 to game 7, the number of possessions changes from game 1 to game 7. And so you're not going to be projecting the same score with the same player level, with the same player level inputs and the same minute expectation. If you have that identical for game 1 and game 7, you shouldn't be projecting the same score. It's just not right. And so there is a little bit of a shape to it, and that part is art. And then once you kind of get into this point on first round series, like here we are, game 5s, game 6s coming up, and if you think you have something that the market is not capturing about what's fair between these two teams, then I'd love to hear it because the game markets themselves get really tight, especially sides. And you kind of are only going to find sort of qualitative angles, right? Like a game 7, for instance, where it's priced with some decay for possessions, but then the possessions themselves, like in the fourth quarter of a tight game, just turn into an absolute slog. And, so that there are some things that I think you can definitely find good bets to be had late in series, but to expect that you're going to be able to pick up any kind of data set and player level performance and be able to make any hay with it from the sides or totals at this stage in the playoffs is pretty light. I still see the most value of any metric being Darko. But that's because I find Darko to be the most predictive as opposed to the most descriptive, right? Like EPM, if you want to know what's the most descriptive, who was the best at blank this year, look at EPM. Look at something that's just kind of capturing efficiency in a way that's balanced for rotation and for, kind of role. And you're going to have, a pretty good descriptor. But for me, at least, Darko does a better job of time decay. And particularly that element of it is the most useful for forward projections. So if you're doing a player level metric, I think that's a good one. If you're trying to come up with other betting angles and you're looking at specific metrics or just looking for ideas, calculate pace for every game, see it for yourself, like what's happening, and then kind of combine that with what you understand the coaches are doing. Listen to people who are kind of true blue blood basketball evaluators and not handicappers necessarily, but just what were you seeing in terms of how they were deploying zone defense versus rotating versus whatever specific elements of the game the experts are evaluating coaching tendencies. And then if you can marry that with basically what you understand a coach or a team to be able to do for adjustments, then you may be able to find something late in series that finds a little bit of space. And I guess we could maybe talk a little. It's and actually this is maybe not super useful since you'll already know the result of Knicks Sixers Game 5 by the time you're hearing this podcast. But that's one of those series where it has felt like to the degree Nick Nurse had many cards to play that he's kind of played them all. And I don't exactly know what additional wrinkles he can bring to the table besides maybe some lighter defensive focus and concentration on Josh Hart. If Nick Nurse has one regret about this series, my guess is that after Josh Hart was just lighting the world on fire in games 1 and games 2, he kind of shifted his defensive approach to make sure Hart wasn't going to hurt them as badly, and that opened the door wide open for Jalen Brunson to just have the game of his life in game 4. So I think ultimately most of the cards have been played now, and I don't know that you're going to get much else. Anything that you've kind of specifically found useful in terms of trying to project adjustments or really read team tendencies for late in series like this?
I think for the most part, like trying to predict, like betting based off of matchup stuff that you're projecting, like individual matchup stuff, for the most part is a fool's errand. I think that stuff is, to your earlier point, it's mostly matchups are descriptive instead of predictive in that. I think back to a series like 4 or 5 years ago, the first year when the Nuggets were like the 2 seed, kind of surprise 2 seed, and they beat the Spurs, the DeRozan Spurs in round 1. And then they played the Blazers in round 2. And everyone's like matchup thing going into that is that, Lillard is just going to annihilate Jokic on switches. And Lillard is going to get all of these pull-up threes. And the Nuggets are going to be drawing dead. And Lillard had probably his worst playoff series of his career. And the Blazers still won anyway. And then when they played, and then the Nuggets and Blazers played the year after or 2 years after that, and Lillard did destroy the Nuggets with everything that people expected, and then they lost the series. So I think that stuff, like you can look at it in retrospect, like, is anyone going to predict that Spo is going to put Bam Adebayo on DeMar DeRozan and is going to completely tank the play-in game for the Bulls? Like that's like, it's really guesswork. And then there's always counters. And you ultimately just have to default to team strength. I think with the coaching thing too, everyone thinks that Eric Spoelstra is a better coach than Joe Mazzulla, but like, what is that actually worth? Like, that's extremely difficult to quantify. And for the most part, coaching will manifest itself in how good the team is in the regular season. And yes, it is different in the playoffs and you do need to make adjustments. But again, that is largely guesswork. And how much win probability does that actually add? Like that as well is, I think, for the most part, guesswork, because it's very difficult to quantify. The other things I'd say just about playoffs and modeling for the playoffs, like a few things that you have to know. One, about pace. I think you lose 4 possessions from game 1 to game 7 generally. If you're betting this stuff and modeling it, you have to be able to quantify zigzag, like specifically like, all right, what happens in this situation when X team is up 2-1 or up 1-0 and going home or going road? Like, I really don't understand zigzag, but it just has to be accepted and you need to be able to quantify that. Different players have different adjustments for the playoffs. Like Jimmy Butler just has to be treated as a different creature in the playoffs, as does Kawhi Leonard, as does Nikola Jokic, particularly with Jokic and Butler, because they just get more aggressive with their scoring, which makes them significantly better players than they are in the regular season. Anthony Edwards might be in that boat as well, the way that he is trending. I mean, for the most part, like at this point, like I'm not betting series prices because I'm like, I think the Wolves are really good and they're going to beat the Nuggets because they're all stuff. Like for the most part, for my betting, like I'm not trying to say that the market is wrong on game-to-game prices at this point. What I'm largely betting is when there are just logical inconsistencies in the price. Like, how are the Knicks 4-point favorites in game 1 against the Sixers and then plus 115 to win the series when they have home court? Like, this makes no sense whatsoever. Or I'm betting sometimes there are just like openers that are just blatantly wrong. Like when Boston opened as dogs to Brooklyn a couple of years ago when they swept Durant and Kyrie, that kind of stuff that's the stuff I'm betting.
Yeah. Or like when the Timberwolves opened as dogs to the Suns and Durant and Booker and swept them. It's deja vu all over again. But no, I'm in agreement with you there in general. And the art part is kind of where I would go. I mean, yeah, maybe I'm being stupid. Like, hey, like there's data. Like you want to quantify zigzag, like here, take the shape of these series in terms of efficiency and just, just force it out of there, like, and apply it. Okay. I'm kind of thinking much more along the lines of, okay, when team A is down, and they now need to force into another look, what are they likely going to do? Will that work all game, or will it only work in the first half? That's kind of the rubric I go through as I'm trying to come up with any type of qualitative layer on top of a quantitative framework.
Yep. But the zigzag is just out of control. Like the Suns in game 3 against the Wolves got out to like -6.5 at one point, and then they opened for the next game +1.5. Having an 8-point swing because of zigzag when there's no change in personnel. Now I understand that the 6.5 number was probably too aggressive on Phoenix, and then they ended up closing as, I think, 1.5 point favorites. But still, like it is incredible to me that is shaping so much of the market. And I guess it's right, but it will never sit right with me, the idea that teams can shift like 8 points based on just motivational factors and whatever else is going into zigzag. Anyway, let's go to the next question, which is from Ka Young Tom. Fair price for Minnesota, Denver. I think this is a really difficult one to handicap because of the injury concerns with Denver, where, I mean, Jamal Murray's calf looked fine against the Lakers, but calves linger. That's a concern. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is dealing with this ankle thing, which I guess is fine because he came back in the game. But I guess in my head, I think we talked about this the other day, I thought that the market was going to price fair. It's like -190, +190, and we're around that price point. It's probably shading. I mean, the market has been shifting to Denver today, but what do you think on this one?
Yeah, I got to let it shift away. Shift all you like. I think that Denver's overrated. I think that the risk of injury for Denver's guards is specifically a huge question mark in my mind right now. My fair on this, when we talked about it, I believe yesterday, was -180, and that was assuming full health for the guards all series. And I know Caldwell-Pope, Murray was phenomenal. Caldwell-Pope came back into the game, and Reggie Jackson looked perfectly fine. But it's a really, really thin room. And those guards are now going to have to play through injury against a team that has wings who are just smothering. And I think the potential for this to be a much, much tougher lift than the Nuggets are prepared for is real. And, most of the focus, I think, in the handicapping community on this series is how are the Timberwolves going to find offense? And honestly, the Nuggets defense doesn't scare me really at all. And I think if you have a huge step backwards from, Anthony Edwards, because he was just running good last round and now he's having to figure it all out again, then, I'm going to be revisiting my thought process on this. But, as we stand here today, I think this is value, small value game one on Minnesota, and just in general, long series, and just in general, I think the Nuggets are a hair overrated, and we've talked about it now, I think 4 or 5 times, and we'll get to it on this podcast later on, I think. But maybe the better angle of attack isn't even worrying about what happens in this series. Let this just be a bloodbath. Hope it goes, 7 games, and have the Thunder in your pocket.
Yeah, I don't really have a strong opinion on this series. I would lean to Denver slightly. I do think their defense is legitimate, and I think what is so unique about Denver's defense, well, not unique, but just what makes it effective, is they're just so long. They just have massive human beings out there. Like Aaron Gordon is huge. Michael Porter Jr., for his sins, is a giant human being. Jokic is obviously 7 foot and knows where to be and how to use his size. And I would just worry that it's just gonna look a lot different for Minnesota's offense as opposed to going up against just no size whatsoever in Phoenix. And like it's a strange niche thing, but just watching how Tatum really struggled in both Denver matchups, and just like him just driving into length, it just didn't look great. And then as a big Naz Reid man, having watched Naz very closely against Denver, and look, Naz Reid isn't going to decide the series by any means, but just it's so hard to score over their length when you have Gordon roaming around there. And Jokic's size. So I'd be just concerned about Minnesota's offense. And also, like, I've just watched a lot of Wolves basketball the past 2 years, and I just find it hard to believe that they've exercised the clown elements of their game, which have surfaced time and time again. And these late game situations, I get that it was good against Phoenix. Phoenix aren't a great defense. And I think it's just going to be, we're going to see more of like Cat just bundling into two guys for a charge with 70 seconds left in the game, or Anthony Edwards taking bad mid-range pull-ups and going, 1988 Michael Jordan when it needs to be more kind of, 2024 Anthony Edwards free instead. So I don't know. I just don't really trust this Minnesota team. At the same time, maybe the Nuggets' health issues, maybe Minnesota's defense is just that good. Ready for anything this series. I think the market prices are pretty fair.
Yeah. Okay. I have a very quiet, very, very soft opinion on Cat, which is that whatever ghosts were haunting him in the playoffs past seem to be exercised, which has me thinking that he could be sort of the X factor for the Timberwolves. If you've already bought into them at price, if you've already kind of taken some shots on the T-Wolves, I think that's kind of where you have to be in terms of what his impact on this series is going to be. He's going to have to be a factor. If he's not, then they're in trouble. And you look specifically at the fourth quarter of their end of regular season matchup. What was that, April 4th or something? And it was a brutal fourth quarter for the Timberwolves offensively, and they did not have Cat, and he felt like a huge missing piece at that point. I think these could be epic games if he shows up.
Yeah, I love Cat. I'm Cat's biggest fan. I think he's violently underrated. Like, I think Cat's just better at basketball than Domantas Sabonis. And I guess it's close-ish, but I'd rather have Cat on my team. I think that his offense and his shooting is just so underrated. He's not a great defensive player, but on this team, it doesn't matter as much. And he, again, like the thing with defense, if you're just a massive human being, it just covers up for a lot of sins. And he is a massive human being. And I think that, yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch how they defend Jokic. I assume it's going to be Cat on Jokic with Gobert roaming off Gordon as they've done in the past. And to be fair, like if you're a believer in the Wolves, this is the team that Jokic has the most trouble with, I think, by far, because they have the most size and they have Rudy Gobert, who was magnificent against the Suns.
I will also say, since Rudy Gobert got to Minnesota, Cat's defense's trajectory is straight line up. Like he's like whatever kind of anchoring you have to seeing him play poorly defensively. And, let's see what seasons, 2020, 2021, even in the 2021-22 season, he had some serious lapses. Last year, he took a step forward, and this year it was a real step forward. So let's go, Cat. Yeah, do something.
No, I'd like to see the Denver Nuggets out of the playoffs. I don't have a lot of Wolves, but I've got a lot of Thunder and a lot of Mavs, and I would like to see Denver go bye-bye. I don't think they will, but there's a chance. All right, next question from John Charles. When you build priors for rookies in player-level models, is it strictly a function of measurables and historical performance by draft position and age, or is there a subjective element as well? Thank you. Cheers.
There is one factor besides age and performance that I think is important, and that is, well, for outside of the quarterback. Okay, sorry. Let's talk about this in the context of quarterback, and then let's talk about it in the context of role position player, and then sort of supporting piece, right? I think for me, a rookie gets a grade based on draft position, and which as a proxy for pedigree. I will qualitatively make some adjustments if it's a bad year, right? But you get your draft slot expectation for your position, and you get an age arc for your position, right? Because every position develops at a different pace. And if you are a quarterback, we have a specific expectation. If you are picked blank, and you have a specific uncertainty band, which is important to capture as well, because a lot of times, like in the case of Caleb Williams, is it a median upgrade over what Justin Fields was last year? Almost certainly. Is it a wider band of uncertainty? Almost certainly, right? So there's definitely that aspect that you need to capture with rookies. And then, from there, I think it's a matter of how do they deviate from that arc, and how long do you wait before you fundamentally adjust off your prior. Like, it took me till week maybe 8 last year before I made a strong adjustment to my prior for Bryce Young. I thought Bryce Young deserved 1.01 pedigree as an operating estimate to start the season. I waited until we saw how he looked coming out of the bye before I made a meaningful downgrade to what I expected from him as far as the performance went. And I still am a little bit unsure if I was too aggressive in that evaluation based on just how little there was to work with in terms of talent around him and a system, right? Like, everything kind of went poorly for him. He played poorly in a bad system with no talent, right? And so with no protection. And so, that all kind of has to get stewed together in some way. But I think, starting out with pedigree as an initial point, and then using a curve that is supported by the data for player level performance is perfectly fine. And then when it comes to skill position groups, that's different, right? 2 guys drafted back-to-back wide receivers, but have very different roles in terms of volume. I do not think you should treat them the same. And what I mean by that is there is almost now a pretty clear evidence that you can have an immediate impact in terms of performance if you are given a relatively large role and if you are at a relatively high draft stock. Like Keon Coleman this season versus Xavier Worthy, right? I'm expecting more out of Keon Coleman because his volume is going to be that much higher, considering his role within that offense relative to Xavier Worthy. And so I think, that is subjective. But the place you are on the depth chart of a skill position group definitely matters. Your role within the offense definitely matters. Are you a tight end in a 2 tight end system? How long is it going to take? Tight ends develop at a very slow curve. So, this is it's a very, very interesting topic that, probably need to spend an entire off season of science, like really trying to fully answer. But I think the key answers to this question are every position gets treated a little bit differently. And, for the most part, you're using some sort of historical development curve as a backbone, and then deviating based on evidence.
Yeah, it's I think the thing with rookies is that they just have to have the most violent and abrupt adjustments to their ratings the quickest, in that we come into this season and like Justin Jefferson has 2 bad games, nothing changes really with how you view him as a player. If Keon Coleman has 2 monster games, then you have to adjust, obviously, much more aggressively off of that. And it's kind of like the CJ Stroud thing was interesting this year, where it's like, how many games do you need to just accept that he's like the 7th best quarterback in the NFL or whatever? Like 5, probably not enough. 9, maybe enough. And certainly by the end of the season, he just had to be accepted that way. All right, it is the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. Don't miss the 150th running of the Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs. Coverage starts at 2:30 p.m. Eastern this Saturday, only on NBC and Peacock. All right, couple questions about the Derby. Question from our friend Brett: best horse to fade and play in Kentucky in KY matchups, Drew?
Yeah, so he's talking about the Derby, and he's talking about, if you don't know, there is a parimutuel pool, which is sort of the common betting pool where you're betting on the winner. You're betting on a horse to hit the board, win, place, or show. You're betting on a superfecta, which is a parlay of 1 through 4 correct. You're betting on a horizontal, which is a pick 6, so you're picking 6 in a row as like a parlay. And all the parimutuel stuff is you don't know what price you're getting until the race starts, because they put all the money in a pot and they divide it up based on who bet what. For fixed odds, you can take a price on a horse, like we talked about yesterday with Anna Marie in the 20-1 range, because again, like, don't expect 20-1 to be the number that Anna Marie goes off in the parimutuel pool, so might as well bet it now. And I think that is definitely a good alternative to parimutuel staking. And then there's matchup betting, which is really, really a very fun thing to do when you have a field of 20 horses, and there are some super obvious candidates, I think, in terms of bet or fade this year. And I am dying to see what horses they match up against each other. We are at the whim of some very, very smart horse handicappers who come up with the matchups. They're not idiots. They're not going to put a closer against a sprinter and expect that people are going to bet the sprinter because he's going to take off, right? And so, there is a little bit of wishful thinking that you're going to find, gold when it comes to matchup betting. And they typically match up horses with similar styles. But in this particular race, and in the fact that there is probably about 50%, in my opinion, that this is going to be a hot pace because of how many sprinters are in the race, and the fact that specifically a horse with early speed who likes to be on the lead in door knock is in the one, and that horse has to be sent. They have to send one. And he's got the inside track. He's going to be on lead, and he's going to push the pace. There are another of other horses that are perfectly spaced out between 1 and 17 who all have early speed, and those horses are going to kind of team up in terms of lead, and there's going to be an opening flight that's probably going to be in the 45 second range coming around the first quarter. So I think ultimately this is, or first half mile, excuse me. And so I think ultimately this is potentially opens the door for Catching Freedom, Anna Marie, Sierra Leone to come off of the pace and close with authority and hit the board, if not win the race. And those are the horses that I would look to back in matchups against horses that are going to be closer to the pace. And then I would look to fade in matchups. Dornock has very, very decent likelihood to finish last in this race. TO Password has a decent likelihood to finish last in this race. And I think, anyone that you tap as early speed, who is going to be burned out by the time they come around the home stretch, are the clear and obvious fades. There are other kind of horses that are like, well, what are you doing here? Kind of horses, like endlessly, like you probably should be on the turf in one of the earlier races, but the Derby is the Derby, and if you have a chance to run it, you run it, I guess. I think that little kind of subsection of horses, I think, are decent-ish fades. And then you have horses like Catalytic, who are not even remotely on anyone's like warm list whatsoever, but ran, I think, a pretty effective, second place to Fierceness in the Florida Derby, who people are probably sleeping a little bit on, right? Like the workmen who are out there who really don't have a chance to hit the board, but who are going to get in there 7, 8, 9, right? They're just going to run that horse, to the wire. They're not saving him up for, the Belmont in 5 weeks. They're running him to the wire. So, those are the types of horses you want to back, and the ones you want to fade, I think, are the ones that are going to be on the early pace that are going to flame out.
Okay. Well, I have nothing to add. This is not my domain, but I will take your good word, for everything there. The next question is from Mason Phillip. What brown liquor outside of mint juleps will you be consuming at the Derby? Producer Adam has kindly put in the mint julep ingredients, which is 1 teaspoon powdered sugar, 2 ounces of bourbon whiskey, 2 teaspoons water, and 4 mint leaves.
Yeah, so not a julep guy. In general, I kind of steer clear of sweet when it comes to cocktails, right? There's like a way to make a margarita where you're using agave nectar versus one where you're using sweet and sour, right? And like I would probably spit out the sweet and sour, and I would enjoy the agave nectar one, right? And so softer sweet is kind of my ballpark when it comes to cocktails. And you go to a tiki bar, you give me like a Jungle Bird, give me something with some bitters, right? Like none of the super high sugar stuff. That said, it is tradition. You drink 1 mint julep. The ones they serve at Churchill Downs are wildly sweet. But so I don't even know if I finished mine last year. I tried. I gave it an honest effort. But the brown, they have a competing, kind of classic cocktail there called the Woodford Spire, which is basically just bourbon and lemonade and maybe Sprite or something. But whatever the case is, that one is way, it's more on the sour side than it is on the sweet side. And I like that one quite a lot. So probably doing some Woodford Spires in the brown liquor department this weekend.
Yep, that's fair. When I was a young man adjacent in Australia, I don't know if this was just me and the people I grew up with, but the kind of drinking routine would be you would drink beer all night, and general Australian lagers, and then someone, when it got late enough, close enough to midnight or just after midnight, someone would make the call and the declaration. There was a signal, actually waving your finger around in the air like that, and that was the sign that it was okay to transition to sugary drinks and leave beer behind. And for me and my friends, and I think for pretty much 90% of Australians, that was, do you call them vodka cruisers here? Like UDLs, which is basically just mixed, very sweet mixed vodka drinks. And then after doing that for like 7 years, now I'm scarred completely. Like I can't do that at all. Now I need my spirits. I want my alcohol to taste like poison is the main thing. Like I want some truth and honesty in what's going into me. So that's where I'm at now. So yeah, not really a big mint julep guy either. So yeah, I'll probably join you on the Woodfords. All right. Next question from Scoots. Can you tell the Edelman, I believe it's Pedroia or Jacoby Ellsbury?
Yes. Yeah.
Some form of pro story from last year's Derby. So
yes. Good. So Saturday is a cool experience at Churchill Downs in general. If you haven't done it, put it on your sports bucket list. I think almost certainly. You buy a ticket. It's all you can eat, all you can drink inside the grounds. And there are many, many good places to watch the race. You do not need an elite, luxury box, but it's nice. And the second floor of the Homestretch Club, I think, is the hottest place to watch the race in general. Number one, because you get to see them load in the gate, and then you get to see them come down the homestretch. And there's a whole little standing section with high tops for your cocktails and for doing your handicapping. The last year, that was my camp out spot for all day Saturday, and got to make friends with some folks who were enjoying the racing a lot and the drinking a lot. And one of them was an ex-baseball player, played for the Blue Jays, and he was serious. He was taking it very seriously, and he was good, and we were winning bets. And his friends trickled over, and they wanted to know who bet on the Derby, and I look up, and it's Dustin Pedroia. What? Whoa. Cool. Okay. Yeah. And then another guy trickles over and look up. Oh, it's Jacoby Ellsbury. And we had a great time because there's a very long gap before the actual race runs itself where, the TV stuff happens. And, during that time, I kind of taught them basically like the holy grail of us in the betting community is you hit the superfecta in the Derby. Dollar pays like 10 grand. Got all top 4 horses right. It's very tough. And they were, kind of went through the mechanics of what the superfecta is, how you put one together. You want some bombs on the bottom so you can get the big price. And it was a lot of fun kind of going through every horse and kind of telling them strengths, weaknesses, which ones were tosses, which ones we were putting on our card. And then we bet Mage to win at the top, and Mage won. And they were very, very excited. So last year's Derby was an all-time moment for me. I'm glad I got to tell that story. I promise you, I did not submit that question myself just to be able to tell the story, but that's probably the coolest thing that's happened to me at a sporting event, I would say.
You grew up you were in Boston for a long time, right?
Yeah. I spent my formative years there. I was a lifeguard at Walden Pond, sitting on the lifeguard stand, listening to the radio broadcast of the Red Sox and listening to talk radio that was Red Sox all day, every day. If you've been to Boston, I don't know if you can tell this in Connecticut, but in Massachusetts you can. Red Sox win or lose in the summer, and like you can feel it with the attitude of everyone you interact with up there. It's a huge part of the culture.
Yep. It's still insane to me that you worked on Walden Pond. Henry David Thoreau's Walden was like a formative book for me. So yeah, not bad. Cool to hang out with Jacoby and Dustin, the lad. Dustin Pedroia, the Red Sox legend. And Ellsbury, not quite legend, but still very good player, and got paid in a big way. All right, question from John N. At what age did you first start gambling, and what sports were you betting on? Talk about your first big memorable win. I will start off. This is questionable how we want to declare here. I believe my first wager that I can recall was when I was under the legal age to gamble, and it was betting on Ben Cousins, an Australian football player, to have over 12 and a half possessions in a preseason game. And then the line was set like minus 110 each side. I won't go into the Ben Cousins story, but basically he was this like superstar of football who then got engulfed in a drug scandal and had to leave the sport for a year. And then he came back with a new team. He was a West Coast Eagle, and then he signed with the Richmond Tigers. And it's his first preseason game. And this is a guy who averaged 25 possessions a game, I think, when he was at West Coast. And then his first preseason game, his line is set at 12 and a half. I'm like, there's just no way this is correct. Like, it's his first game. This is a massive spectacle. They're going to go out of their way to give him the ball. There wasn't really much more science in it by that. And I had, at the time, a large amount of money for me on this and was sweating it all day thinking about the bet. And then he has 12 possessions in the first half, and I have over 12 and a half. And so I'm like, oh, it's done. Brilliant handicap, Croucher. You've done it again. And then there's words that he has a little niggle in his hamstring at halftime and may not come out. I think he came back out and got like two possessions. So he went over and then he left the game with an injury. So ended up squeaking it out. But that was my first proper wager. And then the first one where I actually won a material sum was the Orlando Magic winning the 2019 Southeast Division. I got a real huge attachment to.
Yes.
Yeah, that was like the Nick Vucevic, Aaron Gordon, DJ Augustine, Terrence Ross off the bench, ton of Evan Fournier pick and roll. There was a lot of like Wes Iwundu. Yeah. I developed really strong opinions where I was like, stop playing Jerry and Grant off the bench. Michael Carter-Williams brings more to the team. And I was watching every single Magic game down the stretch, for better or worse. They pulled it out. I think that was like 20-1 or so. But
you got it right. You probably better right at the All-Star break, right? I remember that one like it was yesterday. Yeah. Because the Hornets, they front-loaded the Hornets schedule that year because the Hornets were hosting the All-Star game. And they had all of these road games in the back end, and the Miami Heat were stinking, and it was literally like
the Dwayne Wade loss.
Yeah, it was like the Magic should be favored. Why are they 20-1? I remember that like it was yesterday. First bet I ever made that won. Bet my late great grandfather Warren Donaldson. Bet him $1 on the first Cowboys Bills Super Bowl. And never let him live that one down because the Cowboys did take the Bills to town in emphatic fashion. And I still have that dollar. He kind of wrote the scoreline and, congratulations note on me. So on that one for me. So Uncle Warren, Grandpa Warren, RIP in peace. First like ever meaningful stake I ever had and win was the Patriots as the team of destiny with Tom Brady in 2001. I was betting college basketball. I won a couple of weird college basketball bets when I was like literally figuring out online betting and rolled it all into the Patriots team of destiny. I think I got maybe 10-ish, 15-ish to 1, but then it cashed. I withdrew my balance. I got the check in the mail from a Chinese holding company. I was terrified walking it into the bank. Like, they're going to take me to jail. Like, this is definitely illegal. But I needed that money to go to Cancun for spring break, Jay. So I walked that thing right into the bank, deposited it, and away we went to Mexico, spent it all within a week.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we could do multiple podcasts on the stories that I have with very shady bookmakers overseas, and Nigerian holding companies and whatnot. But anyway, we'll save that for a later day. This Sunday, Liverpool and Tottenham face off in a must-win match as time is running out. On the Premier League season, can the Reds keep pace atop the table? Can Spurs make a late push into the top 4? Find out at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, exclusively on Peacock. All right, rating the Oklahoma City Thunder, who still, it's very strange to say out loud that they ended up being the 1 seed and they sweep the Pelicans. Not a huge surprise. And now they await the winner of Mavs Clippers, which is a war of attrition with Kawhi already ruled out for Game 5. Luka Doncic has this tape job that makes him look like Tom Hardy in Venom. I don't know what's going on with his leg there, but that's not good. And additionally, he's not good because he hasn't played well in the series. But anyway, the winner of that series will play the Thunder, who are plus 350 to win the West, 11-1 to win the NBA Finals. Do you think there is a bet to be made on this team? And I guess how would you rate this team in comparison to the Nuggets and the Wolves in particular, the two teams already through?
Well, I got to tell you, reflecting on the numbers that I made for the first round of the playoffs, I had the Thunder meaningfully underrated, Jay. Very sad. I did not have sincere positions on the Thunder to do well against the Pelicans, considering how they matched up and that we knew that there was going to be no Zion Williamson and a beat up Brandon Ingram. But where my numbers missed the most, clearly rating this Thunder team, was their defense. Holy smokes. They found an entirely another gear in a playoff series. And I think when you have one of the best coaches in the NBA, we shouldn't be surprised that he has his guys specifically dialed in on their opponent and their opponent's strengths and weaknesses and forcing their opponent into their weaknesses the way that the Thunder coaching did. I thought it was a masterclass by Degano in round one. And I think he's going to have a clear coaching advantage if Dallas comes through and a small coaching advantage if LA comes through. So Dallas is kind of the more scary opponent because of the ceiling that is presented by Luka if he is healthy. But either way, I think the Thunder are in pretty good shape to get to host the Western Conference Finals this year, which is amazing. The big knock on them coming into this playoffs, and you've said this yourself out loud on this podcast, people were discounting them because they haven't ever done it before, but they've done it now. They've won 4 games, and they did it in a way that you have to respect as for real. I would make OKC something in the ballpark of -240 over LAC and -190 over Dallas, if those are the two series. And if you have and I'm assuming no Kawhi, and I'm assuming full strength Doncic to get to those numbers. If you discount Doncic because of the injuries and or the fatigue of going a 7-game series, I'm going to be kind of in the -240 range for that as well. So decent chance I'm going to have some OKC in pocket once we get to that point in time, depending on how the market feels about Dallas and LA. There's a world where Dallas does something spectacular to get out of this series that convinces people that they're for real again. I'm not there, and I personally think the way the OKC matches up is pretty solid. So I don't know. I've kind of talked myself into there is very, very little margin right now at the top of the West between OKC and Denver. And I think Denver is more fragile because of the injury situation to their guards. If they come up against a fully fit OKC team, and you have, effectively three guards who are all playing on, kind of ankle injuries. I don't know. I'm not going to be afraid at all to go hard against the Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals, despite having the best player on the court.
Yeah, I think if you've got OKC -190 fair against Dallas, then you will be having a bet on OKC, because I think the market is going to have that closer to pick, in that Dallas are just hugely respected by the market now. Like, Dallas are 3-point favorites in LA for Game 5 as we're recording. Like, that is a ton of respect for the Mavs, who were treated like, I think, like the juggernaut that they were in the post-trade deadline period, where they were a top 3-4 team in the league. The Thunder are a very strange team for me to wrap my head around, because you look at the numbers and it's like, all right, well, yeah, they were second in the NBA in net rating, only behind Boston. They're the number 4 defense, number 3 offense. Yeah, this team should just be treated as elite. And I just watch them play, and I'm like, this team is so small. Like, are they really going to make the finals? But I guess that what they lack in size, they just compensate for in kind of just length and solidity across the board, where they just don't have any weaknesses really on defense. We spoke about this the other day. If Josh Giddey is your worst defender, then you're in a pretty good spot. Just having the 2 creators in Shea and Jalen is such a boon. I mean, the test is going to come where, if they have to go up against Dallas and Jason Kidd decides to play Gafford and Lively, guys who really crash the glass, and then if they come up against Denver and Jokic's size, or if they go up against the Wolves and all the size that Minnesota has, Minnesota don't really assert their size on the glass as much. Given the issues they've had the past couple of years with transition defense. I mean, yeah, I think my gut default is that, you just have to default to the fact that this is, a plus 6.5 type of team, and the Nuggets are a +7, +7.5. And once you put in home court, there's not that much of a gap between them. And I think the Thunder are probably, I think they're a better team than the Wolves, frankly, just with the amount of diversity that they have on offense in particular compared to Minnesota. So, yeah, I think this team is for real. And I think that they are the third most likely team to win the title right now behind Boston and Denver.
Yeah. I think the material advantage of the rest that they're afforded because they swept is going to be big time as well. Because I don't think, that Dallas Clippers is probably going 7.
Yeah, probably, which is just infuriating. This Dallas team played with this food in Game 4. That series should be over, and it's very much not. But yeah, no, and also like Shea hurt his ankle, so it's good that he'll have an extra bit of time to fix that up because they're going to need Shea 100% to get out of the West. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please don't forget to rate and subscribe. And finally, a reminder that you can catch all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.